BYU basketball starting forward Kennard Davis Jr. was arrested yesterday by Provo police, and we're inspecting the impact it's going to have on him, BYU, and this season.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. I'm Jake Hatch, executive producer of the KSL Sports Zone in Salt Lake City, Utah, and a 14-year credentialed media member at BYU. I am your resident expert and insider, your host on this podcast. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And also, thank you for making the Locked On Podcast Network America's #1 sports podcast network. All right. This was a show that I planned to talk about football, but when news breaks, we're going to talk about it. So coming up on today's show, we're going to talk about Kennard Davis Jr., what we know about his arrest for alleged DUI by Provo police yesterday, what the impact it will have on the BYU basketball program, the impact it has tomorrow as BYU faces off as the number 7 team against third-ranked UConn in Boston, Massachusetts, and also try and read the tea leaves of what it could mean for the season ahead for the BYU Cougars. So we'll get into all of that on today's show. So right out of the chute, let's talk about what we know, the facts, as they say. And any of you who may be upset that I'm talking about this, understand that this is a legal matter. This is not honor code. This is not a civil lawsuit. They are different because when it comes to situations like this is a matter of public record. And it involves a car accident because Provo police responded to a car accident at approximately 11:45 a.m. Mountain Time, according to a press release that came from the Provo Police Department. While responding to said crash, officers, quote, found reason, unquote, to arrest one of the drivers. That would be 20-year-old Kennard Davis Jr. for, quote, suspected DUI. That's driving under the influence. Now, Davis obviously is a BYU basketball team member, transferred from Southern Illinois, started the 2 games he has played for BYU, he's been a starter for. He sat out Tuesday night against Delaware with an undisclosed injury. And the situation at hand here is that DUI, it covers a myriad of different things, because DUI means driving under the influence, but it doesn't specify alcohol, painkillers, marijuana, other illicit drugs. So when the facts come out on that, we'll delve more into that. But let's acknowledge right up front right now that this is a really, really tough look for the BYU basketball program, because I can tell you that BYU is very, very cognizant of its image, as they should be, as every university should be. But BYU, being a religiously affiliated institution, obviously sponsored by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, they pay, a little more attention to how things are being looked at out there among the general populace, as it were. And having a player on one of your most premier programs, speaking in BYU parlance, it's football and it's men's basketball. They are the front and center athletic programs for BYU, Brigham Young University. And to have a player arrested for DUI in the aftermath of an accident, it's not a look they want, speaking of BYU. Now, there are going to be more facts that come out on this. Provo police have told reporters like Jay Drew, etc., that they will release the full findings from the officers who responded to this incident, and it could come out as soon as today, Friday. Now, I will also acknowledge this for those of you who are unaware. I am recording this at approximately 11 p.m. Mountain Time on Thursday night. This is coming out Friday morning early. So in the interim, new news could have come out. So understand that I'm giving you what I have in the moment I'm recording this podcast. There will be developments, and we will cover them as they come right here on Locked On Cougars. But it is a bad look for BYU. They do not want to have stuff like this, especially when it comes to the BYU men's basketball program and all the headlines they made in the offseason, all the waves they made when it came to NIL, adding the likes of a guy like AJ Dybantsa to this roster. Kennard Davis Jr. in his own right was a fairly highly thought of addition that BYU brought in via the transfer portal, because they saw him as a perfect fit as a 3-and-D guy, for lack of a better term, on this roster. What is his status going forward? That remains unresolved. The statement from BYU that we were given in the media said that we are aware of the allegations and looking into the situation, unquote. No definitive declaration of what's going on. Kennard Davis Jr. status. Heck, I tried to find out on Thursday night if, in fact, Kennard Davis Jr. was on the team jet that flew to Boston yesterday ahead of their matchup against UConn tomorrow. And I was unable, as of recording this podcast, to confirm if he was or not. That will ultimately come out, I'm sure, relatively quickly, because either he's going to be spotted, in Boston with the team, or we'll find out more information via the proper channels. But let me reiterate, it's a black eye for BYU, and they're going to have to handle this with the utmost care. Now, could it be DUI for a number of different things? Yes, it could be, but those details are lacking at this time. So you're going to take a PR hit. That's just a simple fact of what BYU is in this modern age of social media. There are anonymous troll accounts who want nothing more, and I'm sure that they already have been doing it overnight. They're going to be absolutely denigrating, tearing down Kennard Davis Jr., BYU men's basketball, and anything else associated entity-wise with it. So it'll be interesting to see when the ultimate police report comes out, what it entails, why police found fit to arrest Kennard Davis Jr. We'll see what ultimately he faces in terms of legal situations, because he was cited and then released, because a lot of times when it comes to DUI, you are cited, but BYU is really, really careful with all this, because also running afoul of the law of the land is also going to put you in the crosshairs of BYU's honor code as a student, because obviously BYU's honor code prohibits consumption of alcohol, illicit drugs, and the like. So it's a really, really delicate matter, and I don't want to – I'm trying to just play it right down the middle here. I did this with the Jake Retzloff situation earlier this summer. If I was doing a podcast back in the era of Brandon Davies, who some of you, trust me, I've gotten some comments that it feels like deja vu a little bit with the Brandon Davies situation. Understand that I'm just trying to give you the simple facts of what's going on. Now, coming up next, BYU does have a showdown against UConn tomorrow. It's a top 10 matchup. It's one of the premier games on BYU's schedule. I'm talking as a whole. A guy like AJ Dybantsa was very eager to go back home and play in front of his hometown fans, because he grew up about 40 minutes south of Boston in a town called Brockton, Massachusetts. And this obviously mars what should be a celebrated top 10 showdown. And so we're going to step aside from the Kennard Davis situation, just understanding that there is a whole lot of loose ends that are unresolved out there. Understand that, and we will cover them as they come on that front. But we're going to talk just simply on the court tomorrow. UConn, BYU, what to expect, and quite frankly, what it means for the BYU basketball program to have a game of this caliber. And we'll get into that next as we continue on right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at DoorDash. Now, it's almost the weekend. Time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by our friends at DoorDash. Just like you win every Saturday with DoorDash Streak, saving you more every time you order. These players deliver when it mattered most. Let's break it down. Now, for BYU this past week, it was a tough week. Let's be honest. BYU losing to Texas Tech. But I do want to give a shout out to Jack Kelly. He absolutely stood out amongst a really tough loss for the BYU football program. And I think he was maybe the player overall of the game for the BYU football program. He came through, no hesitation, no delay. And if you've been watching him week after week, this performance is not a fluke, because Jack, simply put, he's on a streak. And just like Jack Kelly delivered for BYU, DoorDash delivers on your Saturdays. DoorDash Streak, you can save every Saturday that you order, stack it up all season long. You can save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday, keep that streak alive, and fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply, and the promo period runs through 11/18. Today's show is also brought to you by a new local friend of the podcast, and that's our friends up at Woodward. We're just going to say it right now. The fun per foot ratio at Woodward Park City is second to none. Located just 20 minutes from Salt Lake Valley, Woodward offers experiential learning in a radically fun and safe environment. Any of you who know what Woodward is all about, you know what I'm talking about. Facilities for all abilities, doors always open to first-timers and regulars alike. Bounce from park to pits, ramps to tramps, and back again. Mountain Park season passes are on sale now for just $499. Rip hot laps, with a posse after school and in the evening. Maximize your mountain time this winter at one of the best train theme parks in Utah all season long. And the best part is, if you're looking to go all in, all access memberships provide just that, from passes to perks, discounts, and more. Just starting out, learn to fly with the Woodward Tribe in seasonal and multi-week programs that build skills and confidence in a Stoke-inspiring environment. Just 20 minutes from Salt Lake, Woodward offers experiential learning with facilities for all abilities. Learn more right now by going to woodwardparkcity.com and take advantage of this. Once again, that Winter Mountain Park Pass, just $499. Get started once again at woodwardparkcity.com. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day, and thank you for making the Locked On Podcast Network America's #1 sports podcast network. All right, so BYU basketball is going to take on the UConn Huskies tomorrow night, and Dan Hurley was very animated, as he often is, earlier this week, talking about the showdown that he is going to have, him and his team, speaking of UConn, have against BYU. And I am fully expecting to see the Dan Hurley of, all Dan Hurleys in this game, because if you've watched any of UConn basketball in the recent past, Dan Hurley is about as animated a coach you're going to see on the sidelines. He'll have his hands behind his back. He'll be barking at people. He'll take his glasses off, rub his temples. He's a character. But it does not preclude the fact that we've got a showdown between two top-tier rosters, accepting the fact that BYU is very likely, I think, to be without a guy like Kennard Davis Jr. This is a showdown that is going to test BYU and show us, I think, a lot of where BYU stands in the pantheon of great college basketball programs right now. The Cougars are ranked 7th in the AP poll. They moved up from their opening week number 8 ranking, whereas UConn, much like BYU, is 3-0 on the season, but they're going to be facing off against their best opponent to date as well. This is a huge, huge game for BYU to kind of establish, okay, this is who we are, because much like BYU, UConn has played, okay opponents. They played New Haven and won 79-55. They played UMass Lowell, won 110-47 in that game, and then beat Columbia out of the Ivy League 89-62. They have not been tested to this point. In fact, I would say the best game between the two programs that's been played to date is BYU's win opening night against the Villanova Wildcats, and it's by a good margin in terms of just looking at name brand recognition, Ken Palm rating. You get what I'm talking about. This is an intersectional game that is going to show, I think, really what BYU's made of. Because if they can go toe-to-toe with a UConn Husky squad that has got championship DNA in it, and even you who know the history of UConn know that guys like Jim Calhoun, Kevin Ollie, and obviously most recently a guy like Dan Hurley have led them to multiple national championships. This is one of the premier basketball programs, a true blue blood in every sense of the word, and BYU gets a crack at them to show if BYU is going to kind of run in those same circles this year. We had AJ Dybantsa, who's playing, it's a home game for him. He's coming home to Boston to play in front of a bunch of family and friends who I'm sure will show up. And he said it in the Players Tribune yesterday that his goal is to win a title at BYU, and he's got one season to get it right, because this is a kid that he's headed to the NBA lottery after this season. He has proven already to be a premier talent. He's absolutely unstoppable against the opponents BYU has played so far, but this is a different level of game. I would expect that TD Garden, obviously the home of the Boston Celtics, is going to be chock full of NBA talent evaluators, whether they're scouts, team presidents, GMs, whoever it is that pro personnel evaluators are going to be crawling all over that place because they want to get a look. Okay, AJ is considered to be at worst a top 5 talent in next year's NBA draft. I still think he's the odds-on favorite to be the number 1 pick, but that may be just me from my vantage point as a BYU analyst saying that. But he gets a crack at a roster and a team in UConn that they're going to have NBA personnel saying, okay, let's see what he can do against these guys. He got a little bit of that, obviously, in the preseason when BYU played their game in the Delta Center against North Carolina, but it was an exhibition and obviously did not count in the actual standings. But there were dozens of NBA personnel there for that game to watch it. There were dozens also in Las Vegas for the Villanova game. And if those games can attract that level of, in terms of NBA personnel showing up, this game against a top 5 opponent for BYU as they are inside the top 10 themselves, it's going to like double or triple in terms of what the personnel will be there, because they want a firsthand look at how a guy like AJ, excuse me. I had Kevin Ollie on the brain still. They want to see what a guy like AJ can do against a roster and a program that's got championship quality DNA in it. And that is going to be the interesting part about this. Now, BYU needs Rob Wright. They need Richie Saunders, Dawson Baker, Keba Keita. They've all got to step forward and play their best game to date. I saw some very promising signs, especially in that second half Tuesday night, as BYU ran away from a Delaware squad that I think tested BYU more than anybody, yours truly included, thought they would. Because when you race out to a 10-0 lead, you're up 17-4 at one point in the first half. You're like, what is BYU doing here? They're sleepwalking through this. And I credit it to BYU was looking ahead to this game. I got no problem saying it was BYU was like, okay, Delaware, okay, whatever. No, they were focused on UConn. And to their credit, they found a way to grind through it and run away in the second half. I saw promising signs in the second half, renewed emphasis on the offensive glass, improved three-point shooting, especially from a guy like Richie Saunders, who is going to be, I think, BYU's premier three-point shooter this season. There's a lot of positive signs coming out of that game, but now the level of difficulty gets ratcheted up to a whole nother level. And that's what I'm most interested to see, is how BYU absorbs this level of pressure, because these are the games that people are going to evaluate this season for better or worse on. And it doesn't really matter how other games go. People are going to look past Delaware. They're going to look past the Villanovas. But when you have an intersectional game, top 10, top 5 opponent like UConn, a lot of people are going to sit up and say, okay, heard a lot about this BYU squad. Let's see how they do against a team who's won a national title in the last few years. Let's see what they really are made of. And it's a chance to either show that, A, BYU is that level of team. Kevin Young has absolutely established himself and established BYU as one of those powers in college basketball. Or if they fall, some people say, see, they're not there yet. They're maybe a cut below, but they're not on that top shelf level quite yet. That's what we're looking at in this game. I'm excited for it. I think this is going to be a fun game to watch. 5 o'clock Mountain Time, 7 o'clock Eastern, for any of you who are going to be checking it out. And it's on Fox. It's on network television. And much like you, if you're like me, YouTube TV still is in a dispute with Disney. I can watch this one on my YouTube TV account. So I'm looking forward to it. If you look at Matchup Predictor, ESPN's BPI, Basketball Percentages Index, gives BYU a 35% chance of winning this game. We'll see how it all shakes out. But it's very much a game that I am eager to learn. I think the most I will have learned about BYU basketball to this point in the season, because it's the best opponent to date for BYU. We've learned things from each of the games the Cougars have played so far, but this one stands apart because, just simply put, it is the best opponent to date and far and away one of the best opponents BYU will face, I think, all season long. All right, coming up next, we're going to finish up this show, and we'll keep it on basketball here, but what to expect from BYU as they look forward now. Like what are they trying to really show with UConn, with the Kennard Davis situation? This season, it's got a microscope on it that's unlike many seasons ever. I mean, ever in BYU athletics history. I'm talking not just basketball, just ever across BYU's athletic department. And it's going to be an interesting one to see how the people involved in all this handle their business. And I'll explain kind of what I'm thinking of. I'm stepping on the soapbox coming up next. So stay tuned for that right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's a better place to get in on the action than with our friends at FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks and quite literally everything in between. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game more exciting, especially when your team is making that late push along the way. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Head to FanDuel.com to sign up today and play your game with FanDuel, as they are the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Another plug for you guys to join the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. A lot of good things going on in the Insiders Group, and let's put it this way, a lot of good things on the way as well. So if you want to get in on the action, join us today on the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. Link is in the show notes below. You get a 14-day free trial, and it's just $5 a month to be a part of the group. Get those updates coming to you guys about all things BYU in form of a text message coming directly to your phone. So join us today. Locked On Cougars Insider Group. Once again, link is in the show notes below, or reach out to us and we'll get you squared away as a member. All right. So I have been thinking a lot about this BYU basketball program, because when you have a guy like AJ Dybantsa, who has got posts going up in the Players Tribune, which is usually reserved for like the likes of like Kevin Durant and the like, and I appreciate what BYU is trying to accomplish here with BYU basketball. They have hired a premier coach. They have ponied up millions upon millions of dollars when it comes to name, image, and likeness funds to put together the best roster that they think they can put together, and they're going to chase a national championship. Now, they're off to a good start. Like I said, 3-0 on the court. They have absorbed a interesting situation. It's a black eye. I can acknowledge a spade for a spade with the Kennard Davis situation. No matter what the outcome of that is, it's a PR hit that BYU has to absorb. But it also feels like this is a season that is going to stand apart in so many ways for BYU and BYU basketball, because you've got guys like Kevin Young, who's already been rumored to be linked to high-profile NBA jobs because he came from the NBA, and there's a lot of people who think he's not long for Provo. So there's that. There's the AJ Dybantsa situation where he is a top-tier NBA draft prospect who has got people just all over all the time, I'm sure, trying to get a piece of him. And how does he handle that as the season progresses and really ramps up? And as I said, an intersectional game, the likes of the UConn game, where he's literally playing in front of family and friends. How does he absorb all that? How do the other guys on the BYU roster adapt to their roles? I think Rob Wright has been a breath of fresh air, because I have appreciated, I've sat in 2 post-game press conferences so far at BYU, both of the last home games, and Rob has got a smile on his face. He is very quick to give, I think, honest, heartfelt answers, and you can tell that he is embracing his role as one of the, maybe call him big 3 for BYU, alongside AJ and obviously Richie Saunders. Richie Saunders, most improved player in the Big 12 a season ago, a first-team all-conference honoree. In most eras past of BYU basketball, this would be a guy who would be like front and center, front page, A1 news. But to his credit, this is a guy that's been ultra humble during his time at BYU, despite being one of the best, or if not best players on BYU, one of the best, if not the best player on BYU's roster. He has never been full of bravado and say, look at me. He has taken a backseat to guys like AJ and Rob this year, but it doesn't mean he's any less important than he already was for this BYU basketball team. I look at this as it's going to be a season that is going to be studied, for lack of a better term, for years to come, to see how BYU, and I'm sure there'll be stories written about it for good or worse, no matter how it goes, because it just depends on how the season progresses, that will be looked at and saying, okay, can BYU transform itself into a collegiate basketball blue blood? Can it become one of the premier programs, seemingly coming out of nowhere to compete with the heavy hitters in a sport that has been dominated by a handful of top-tier programs who have name brand recognition? North Carolinas, the Dukes, the UConns, the Indianas. Like think of the who's who of basketball. Gonzaga, for example. Like, can BYU interject their name into those conversations? And now, if, as AJ said in his Players Tribune article, falls on their face and does not accomplish his stated goal, and that's winning a national championship, are people going to lambaste them and say, see, you thought you could buy your way to the top, but you couldn't do that? There will be haters out there along the way. There always are. In this, you can say the sky is blue in this day and age on social media, and some anonymous troll account's going to say, yeah, shut up. Like, and I'd say that just as an example. It's just, it's going to be crazy to see how Kevin Young and company handle this, because there is so much in terms of eyeballs and just pressure on this team. And are they going to crack under it? Are they going to thrive in it? There are so many unresolved things that ultimately probably aren't resolved until we get to next April, when the national champion is crowned. Where are they playing the national championships? I don't even remember. Is it San Antonio? Whatever. The point remains, this is a months months long deal that the Cougars are going to have to embrace. And I think they know what they signed up for. At least I hope they do, because if they didn't, well, you're going to get a rude awakening very, very quickly if you have not gotten that already, because there are a lot of people floating around this program, and I expect it's only going to get crazier and crazier as games, the variety of UConn come along. Now, the interesting part about BYU's non-conference slate is a lot of those top-tier showdowns are neutral site venues being played around the country, versus when it comes to Big 12 play, you're going to have some top-tier showdowns in the Marriott Center, and obviously in true road environments in the Big 12 conference. All of that is going to add a layer to this. And you probably think I'm just talking and talking. I kind of am, because I'm trying to get what I've had in my head here out for you in the public. And I hope you can understand where I'm going with this, is that I look at this as it's going to be an experiment in so many different ways that we're going to learn a lot about this basketball program. It was an absolutely revolutionary season a season ago that Kevin Young comes in. It felt like when Mark Pope left BYU for Kentucky, it was like, holy smokes, have they just squandered some major momentum they built in their first year in the Big 12, finishing 5th in a surprise finish there, quite honestly, despite having that first round exit in the NCAA tournament. Is that all squandered now with Mark Pope exiting stage right and heading to Kentucky? Well, no, in fact, they went out and hired a coach who has only elevated BYU from where they were. The expectations have never been higher for BYU basketball. And I'm a guy, I'm almost 40, so I don't go all the way back to the Danny Ainge era. I can hearken to what others of you out there in the listening public, what my dad and grandpa had talked to me about the eras of Krešimir Ćosić, the Danny Ainge era, some of the great teams in the 80s with Michael Smith and the Devin Durant's, Jeff Chapman's. Like, I can hear all about that, but this, in my nearly 40 years on this rock, this is the biggest season to date. Trust me. I went to games in 1997. Was that the 1-25 season? I watched Steve Young rebuild this program on the fly and absolutely overachieve very early on into his tenure. I saw Dave Rose take that baton and elevate it. I saw Mark Pope do incredible things as well. But here, what Kevin Young's got going right now, there's nothing I think that compares to it. And I'm talking, like I said, I don't have the real world experience to be able to talk adequately about Ćosić or Ainge, but from what I understand, not even those eras line up with this era, like what we're experiencing right now in BYU basketball. So crazy. It's absolutely crazy to consider where BYU basketball has been, where it's going, and what it's going to face coming up. So thank you for bearing with me. Thank you for letting me kind of just take a thought process I've had. Literally, it's been bouncing around my brain, and I wanted to just get it out and kind of just, I guess, spill it out onto the canvas and see if I can make sense of it. But it really does feel like we are watching history, like quite literally sports history in the BYU sense, playing out in front of us. And it's very early on into what ultimately will be a really interesting experiment / lesson that we'll all be able to digest at some point 5-6 months from now. There you go. All right. Whew. That is a Friday edition full of basketball. We didn't talk any football. BYU football plays tomorrow. So this is a basketball edition. I'm going to stay up extra late. I am going to do a football edition as well. So if you're looking for the football chatter, make sure you check out the other show that's going to be coming out from Locked On Cougars. Just put it this way. It's a double feature Friday for you out there when it comes to Locked On Cougars. So as always, truthfully, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. If you have not done so already, by the way, I should have said this earlier. Click the little like button if you're watching this on YouTube. And if you're subscribed, listening to it in the audio format, make sure you're subscribed. Give us a rating, 5 stars, obviously, always appreciated, and a review. Let us know what you like about the show, what you don't like about the show. Any and all feedback is always welcome. So until we see you on the football show, or we see you tomorrow with the postcast edition, I don't know. Next time we see you, as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars a part of your day every single day, and come back tomorrow and make it your first listen of the day right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.